Well, we have some new details regarding the horrifying allegations that are being made about an RCMP officer and his wife. Both have been charged in a case of child abuse in Ottawa. CTV's Mirella Fernandez joins us now with more. So, Mirella, there are court appearances for the couple today. What has happened so far?
Yeah, the 41-year-old RCMP officer made a very brief appearance today. Pretty much up and down. The case was put off until next week for the next time he will appear. He seemed to be quite troubled when he was in court. He had tears welling up in his eyes, and he was hanging his head quite a bit. This is a man who, as we mentioned, is an RCMP officer, used to work for counterterrorism, is what we understand, and both him and his wife have been charged in this case. Let's pull up the list of charges here, and you will see it is quite a long one. Aggravated assault, assault with a weapon, forcible confinement, and failing to provide the necessaries of life. Those are charges against him and his wife. The aggravated sexual assault charge is for the RCMP officer alone, Amanda.
And what do we know at this point about the victims?
There is a full or a lengthy publication ban in this particular case. So we know there are multiple victims. One, we understand, was found in an Ottawa neighborhood, wandering about in the cold, then taken to hospital for treatment. One of the neighbors in the area did see him trying to get some water in the backyard. Here's what he had to say.
I asked him, "What are you doing?" He said, "I just want some water." So I took his water bottle and filled it with water.
How did he look?
He looks like he's really like an old man. His cheeks is all sunken into.
So there we go. That was one of the victims, a male, and we don't know much about the others.
Is the officer still on the job?
The officer actually has not been on active duty since 2011. I did talk to the RCMP this morning. He was last on active duty in May and has this week, after this investigation brought these charges about, has been now suspended, Amanda, but with pay.
And so what happens next?
So we are expecting this afternoon for his wife to make an appearance. It looks like that's going to be a video appearance. And then next week, it looks like we'll have another either one or two court appearances. I did talk to the police in Ottawa who handled the investigation. This time, they do not expect to lay any more charges.
And just remind us again, what are the charges?
The charges, we'll pull them back up and we'll show them to you. And the first set of charges there are for both the man and the woman: aggravated assault, assault with a weapon, forcible confinement, failing to provide the necessaries of life. And as I mentioned, the bottom one applies only to the man in this case. It's an aggravated sexual assault case. And again, the publication and ban, as you know, is because when you have a child victim,
right,
they want to protect the identity. So we can't tell you the name of the couple in an effort to protect the identities of the child or the children involved. So that's why they put in this kind of sweeping publication ban in place.
Of course. CTV's Mirella Fernandez. Thanks so much, Mirella.
Thank you.
A neighborhood is in shock, and police are calling it one of the worst cases of child abuse they have ever seen. A young boy was allegedly shackled and handcuffed in the basement of an Ottawa home for months. The child is now being treated in hospital. The accused in the case, a 41-year-old RCMP officer and his 34-year-old wife. CTV's Graham Richardson joins us now from Ottawa. And Graham, there's not a whole lot that can be said about this case at present, but what can you tell us?
Well, it's simply that everyone, Marcy, who hears about it is absolutely horrified. The neighbors in this neighborhood in the Ottawa area saw this boy essentially wandering around in the neighborhood. One of them talked about the fact he was trying to get a glass of water from the tap, the hose at the back of the house. That neighbor told CTV News he feels terrible because the boy looked like an old man. That's how in such rough shape he was in. Here in Ottawa at CHEO, at Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario, we are told they were absolutely shocked by the condition of the child. There is a full publication ban over the names of the two accused because it could identify the child. The other shocking part of this, of course, is that this involves an RCMP officer. So apparently police were alerted, Ottawa police. They arrived, they were in the home. They saw some things that caused them grave concern. They arrested the man and his wife, and they appeared yesterday in court, and I believe they'll be back this morning as well.
Can you tell us how the police were notified, how they were tipped off about this, Graham?
Well, it appears, Marcy, that it was a combination of that neighbors may have called and seen the child. Some of that is covered under publication ban, so it's difficult to say, impossible to say exactly why or how police were alerted. But just talking to some of the neighbors, surely once the boy was seen and once they came in contact with the home, they clearly understood they had a very, very serious and tragic situation here. The other thing that police have told us, that sources have told us, that there may be more than one. There is more than one victim. This is not just one child. What the circumstances are surrounding that, we don't know, and if we did know, we can't report. But clearly, this is not just one child. The other question here, Marcy, is the role of the husband and the wife. Both are charged essentially with the same things. We have no clear picture on exactly what the circumstances were in the home and why this was essentially allowed to go on without anybody seeing anything for so long. But the court will obviously hear those allegations in the days and months ahead.
Yeah, and we will most definitely continue to follow the story. If I can here, Graham, I'd like to switch gears for a bit, because the RCMP in hot water over a couple of recent reports, including one by Human Rights Watch. And that report focused in on the widespread abuse by RCMP against Indigenous women in BC. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I mean, essentially, we're talking about years in the West and in BC of ignoring the signs for so long. The two cases, of course, are not connected in any way, Marcy. I know you're not suggesting that, but in many ways for the RCMP and Commissioner Paulson, they are, because in terms of the public image of the RCMP, it seems every time you turn around, the Mounties are taking another major hit. This case in Ottawa is one case of an individual and his wife charged with very, very serious crimes. The BC cases, for years, the suggestion was they ignored a lot of warning signs and did not act. And there are also other cases in the West that have been raised about the behavior of senior officers in terms of women in detachments and things like that. So there are significant questions the force has to answer. And for Commissioner Paulson, he clearly wants to turn the page and say this is a new chapter in the history of the RCMP. It is difficult when you keep getting hit with these negative, terrible stories. So, like I say, they're not connected, but in some ways they are.
And just another note on that, Graham. Today, Friday, Human Rights Watch says they will have a face-to-face meeting with the RCMP's E division, which is the same group criticized in that report. Thank you so much for all of this.
On Tuesday afternoon, Wilson Wong heard a noise coming from the back of his house.
I came out the window to take a look.
He looked out the window and saw a child trying to turn on his water tap.
I asked him, "What are you doing?" He said, "I just want some water." So I took his water bottle and filled it with water.
How did he look?
He looks like he's really like an old man. His cheeks is all sunken into. And I said, "Do you live around here?" He said, "Yes."
No old man, just a young boy who he thought was trespassing. And so back on his footprints he went. By Wednesday morning, a boy was in hospital being treated by doctors shocked by his condition as police began investigating one of the worst cases of child abuse they have ever seen. Sources tell CTV News the boy was shackled and confined for several months. The alleged perpetrators, a 34-year-old woman and her husband, a 41-year-old RCMP officer who last worked for the counter-terrorism unit. Under a publication ban, neither can be identified.
I won't be able to comment on it except to say that, it is an RCMP officer who hasn't been on active duty since 2011, but it is just a terrible set of circumstances.
Both are charged with aggravated assault, assault with a weapon, forcible confinement, and failing to provide the necessaries of life. The man is also charged with aggravated sexual assault.
I feel sick to my stomach.
A neighbor who asked not to be identified says she hasn't seen the boy since the summer, and that earlier this week the woman came knocking at the door looking for him.
When he disappeared last time, she was here.
Wait, what do you mean he disappeared the first time?
Like, there was another police car at Thanksgiving.
Police, she says, have been called at least once before when it was believed he had gone missing.
And one more thing we do know and that we can report, Lisa, is that there is at least one more victim involved in this horrific story.
Oh, this almost leaves you speechless, Danielle. How in suburban Ottawa or any Canadian community a child can just disappear for months and nobody notices?
Well, many of the parents we spoke to in the neighborhood who do have young kids say they noticed when he wasn't showing up at the bus stop anymore and thought, okay, maybe he's just changed schools. But add to that it's winter and people tend to stay inside in the winter time. But let's not forget about the gentleman we saw earlier in the story who gave him water on Tuesday. He says he has lost sleep over this. He is kicking himself. How could he have not done anything, he says, but also how could he have known the extent of what is alleged to have happened in that home? Lisa.
Again, a one-time counterterrorism officer in the RCMP behind bars tonight. Danielle Hemamjian in Ottawa. Thank you.
Begin tonight with a horrifying case of child abuse here in Ottawa.
Police arrested an RCMP officer and his wife. They now face very serious charges, including sexual assault and failing to provide the necessities of life.
CTV's Joanne Scher was in court today when the suspects made their first appearance. She's here now with more details. Joanne, what do we know about this case?
Well, we know that the allegations are very serious and shocking. A child sexually assaulted, confined, and mistreated by an RCMP officer and his wife. Ottawa police say they were called to a home on Tuesday evening. Something they saw when they arrived at the house led them to arrest a 41-year-old RCMP officer and his 34-year-old wife.
I can't go into the detail of the investigation. However, just judging by the number of charges, the seriousness of the charges, this is a very serious case. Any case of violence against a child is important and affects us all.
This case, though, appears particularly shocking. Police sources tell us it involves a young child who had been confined to a basement for months. This neighbor talks about a boy he had found wandering in the neighborhood looking for water.
I asked him, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I just want some water." So I took his water bottle and filled it with water. I gave it to him.
How did he look?
He looks like he's really like an old man. His cheeks is all sunken into. And I said, "Do you live around here?" He said, "Yes."
One neighbor says she had seen police at the house before and had wondered about the child. She didn't want to appear on camera. Police sources tell CTV News that the boy had been cuffed and shackled, that there were marks on his body, and that CHEO staff were shocked when they saw him. One police source tells us that this is the worst case of child abuse he had ever seen. The head of the RCMP thanked the Ottawa police for the work they had done on the case.
Obviously, it's before the courts. I won't be able to comment on it except to say that it is an RCMP officer who hasn't been on active duty since 2011, but it is just a terrible set of circumstances.
So the charges are extensive. He faces 3 counts of aggravated assault, 3 counts of assault with a weapon, 1 count of sexual assault, 1 count of failing to provide the necessaries of life, and 1 count of forcible confinement. The woman's charges include 3 counts of aggravated assault, 2 counts of assault with a weapon, 1 count of failing to provide the necessaries of life, and 1 count of forcible confinement. Now, the 2 appeared briefly in court today. He was shackled, glanced around the courtroom, then hung his head as the Crown laid out the charges against him. Both are back in court tomorrow. Carol Ann.
CTV's Joanne Scher reporting for us tonight. Thank you, Joanne.
Okay.
Turning back now to one of our top stories today, the Commission for Public Complaints against the RCMP has released its final damning report into workplace harassment within the force, and it is raising some very serious questions.
Mercedes Stevenson is standing by in Ottawa with RCMP Commissioner Bob Paulson to get his response. Mercedes, we send it over to you.
Thanks, guys. Commissioner Paulson, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your time. I want to start by asking you about something that's just breaking into the news this afternoon, a very disturbing case, news that the Ottawa Police Sexual Assault and Child Abuse Unit have charged a member of the RCMP with 3 counts of aggravated assault, 3 counts of assault with a weapon, 1 count of aggravated sexual assault, 1 count of failing to provide the necessities of life, and 1 count of forcible confinement. We know that there is more than 1 victim in this case and that we're talking about minors. How do you react to that news?
Well, it's a very, very sad story. First of all, I got to say that the RCMP is very thankful for the work that the Ottawa Police have done here in this investigation. Obviously, it's before the courts. I won't be able to comment on it except to say that it is an RCMP officer who hasn't been on active duty since 2011, but it is just a terrible set of circumstances.
So he hasn't been on active duty. Why was he removed from active duty?
Well, I don't think I can talk about any of those details right now. It is before the courts, so I won't be able to comment any more than I already have.
Are you able to tell us at all whether the RCMP found out about this on their own or from the Ottawa Police?
No, this was an Ottawa Police investigation responding to things as they do. And as I say, Chief Bordelot was in communication with my officers and with me today. And I'm very thankful for the professional job that they've done in bringing this together.
I want to move to the other news of today, that report by the police watchdog that deals with the Mounties that talked about harassment and said the force has a real problem with bullying. We've got national strategies about bullying, a lot of people talking about how to deal with it in the school system. Are you concerned about how it's being dealt with in the RCMP?
Well, I'm concerned that we have that problem. And first of all, I should say to the work of the CPC that's been ongoing since I was appointed, that that is a comprehensive, complete examination of our workplace practices. I think it found also, though, that as in the circumstances in which it was launched, that sexual harassment was not the big problem that had been identified at the start. It's a problem. But really, they've found, as I have, and my instincts from the outset have been that we have a problem with how we manage power, also understood as perhaps bullying. So we've done a lot of things in this last year to put systems in place. The Commission has made some sound recommendations. I look forward to reporting on those recommendations, many of which we've already implemented. So, I think it's a good, helpful document from an external, independent review of the organization. And it's going to help us move things ahead.
Well, you talked about the culture there that you're trying to work on that deals with bullying and sexual harassment. This report reviewed 718 cases of harassment. You yourself have talked about the underreporting sometimes of the sexual harassment or bullying cases. We've heard from victims who say that they're allegedly afraid to come forward because being identified could result in reprisals at work. Do you think that this is a much wider spread problem than the report necessarily reveals?
Yeah, no, I don't. I think the problem that's wider than what the report reveals is the cultural sort of dysfunction that we've all acknowledged that exists within the organization that we are working on and that, frankly, we're improving. So, they examined those cases, almost 800 cases. In our action plan, we gave all of the statistics on all of the harassment cases going back for some time. So we understand the data. The data is being centralized. It's being understood by me and my staff here in Ottawa. And we're deploying some pretty proactive and pretty bold steps to try and get that culture fixed.
The report talked about the need to have a national standard for investigation of harassment claims and for training. It seems kind of shocking that a national police force that actually investigates professionally all the time wouldn't have had these standards internally to begin with.
Well, we do have, some degree of investigative standards, and that's part of the problem here with harassment is that, according to me, is that harassment has been investigated as though it were a criminal offense. And we have very good criminal investigators. I think the point here in the harassment standards is to lay down a special approach to how we got to manage this. And that fundamentally means dealing with the underlying behaviors in the first instance so that we don't get into these protracted areas. So these standards have been developed and are being disseminated throughout the force.
What's going to happen to some of these officers who are found to have been harassing their colleagues, especially some who allegedly are serial offenders? Are they going to lose their job in the RCMP?
Well, you know, every case has to sort of bring its own response. I mean, the whole idea behind the government's new legislation is to give me a scheme in which we can focus on conduct and preventative measures for that conduct. So the idea is that we prevent that sort of behavior. When these behaviors get past our ability to prevent them, then we have to deal with them very, very early. In some cases, there'll be discipline, and in perhaps in the most protracted and outrageous cases, there will be dismissals.
You mentioned that you're making progress.
We are making progress.
How do you know you're making progress, Commissioner?
Well, because we've engaged with our employees. And I think the single most indicator for a healthy organization is the degree to which employees engage in the issues that the organization is facing. And I've reconstituted how the organization is structured. I have all the commanding officers reporting directly to me. I'm able to implement plans and actions very crisply now. Our employees are engaging across this country in terms of employee work groups and focus groups, and they're starting to participate in bringing these changes to bear. And we're seeing some progress. We are seeing very successful operations across the country. We're seeing a lot of members succeeding in their work areas, and we've laid down a number of measures and sort of barometers about how we're going to monitor this and report to government going forward.
One final question for you, just to be super quick because we are running out of time, but tough day for the RCMP. How do you feel on a day like this?
Well, it is a tough day for the RCMP. But I feel good. I feel the force is resilient. We're getting some good systems deployed, and these things that give us these tough days have to be fully understood before we surrender to the tough days. So every day is getting better, and I can hardly wait for tomorrow.
Thank you so much for your time, Commissioner. Todd and Amanda, back to you in Toronto.
Thanks very much, Mercedes.